So for this program, we are going to calculate the restaurant bill. I know that we were working with the pseudocode. In order to be able to calculate a restaurant bill, we had a series of steps. And so at the top of the program, I'm going to put the description. Remember, the restaurant bill had a subtotal, a tax, a tip, and a total. And because this is actually a full-blown program, we are going to develop the algorithm in order to write the program. So step 1 is to map out a plan. Step 2 is to circle back around and add some detail. And then the final step in the plan is writing the source code. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create some variables. After we have done that, we are going to calculate the tax. Then we're going to calculate the tip, and I spelled that one wrong. And then we are going to add it all up. And then finally, we are going to display the bill total, the total bill after tax and tip and add in. So then I'm going to circle back around and I'm going to add a little bit more detail. Let me correct the spelling on that one. Creating variables. What variables do you think that we might need in order to execute this program? So there's 3 places that I can look when I'm trying to decide what variables that I might need. The things that I'm prompting the user for, calculations that we are doing, and then things that I'm displaying to the user. So if I want to know what I'm going to display to the user, we are going to print, let me put that as a comment, we're going to print the subtotal, the tax, the tip, and the total. So things that I'm displaying to the user, things that I'm calculating. If I'm going to calculate the tax and the tip, we're going to add it all up. It would seem to me that we need a subtotal, we're going to need a tax, we're going to need a variable for the tip, and then finally we're going to need a variable for the bill total. I'll just call that total. So I've circled back around step number 2 to add a little bit more detail. We should probably check my spelling here. And then we are going to step number 3, actually write the code. So I'm going to call this variable subtotal. I'm going to set it equal to, how about if we set it equal to $100? For the tax, I'm going to create a variable called tax. I'm going to calculate the tax, and so I'm going to initialize it to a floating point. I'll do the same thing with the tip. We'll initialize it to a floating point. And then the variable called total, I'm going to initialize that to a floating point. I'm going to set the subtotal to a value that I can use to calculate. Now the next step says to calculate the tax. So I'm pretty sure that the tax is going to equal the subtotal multiplied by all right, I went back and looked through our pseudocode, and it looks like our tax rate was 35%. Wow, that's a lot of tax rate. And I'm pretty sure that my tip rate, that I'd said that I was a terrible tipper. So I'm going to say tip equals the subtotal multiplied by, I believe it was only 15%. Terrible tipper. And then we're going to add it up. The variable that we decided to put that in from line 13 is the bill total. So the bill total is going to equal the subtotal plus the tax plus the tip, all 3 of them added together. Then it said that we just wanted to print each one of those individual items. So we are going to print subtotal, tax, tip, and total individually. Now that begs the question, if my subtotal is $100 and my tax is 35%, I'm pretty sure that's $35. So that would be $135 with a $15 tip. That should be $150. So when I run it, let's see if my math is working. There you go. It's always a good idea to run some values, numbers that I can do on the fly to begin with. So I got this correct. If I were to change this to $200, 35% of 200 is 70. 15% of 200 is 30, so that should be, I do believe, $300. Oh, there you go. My math is not failing me. But is it possible that I could print them all together instead of having each one of them on an individual line? So starting on line 33, I'm going to see if I can put all 4 of these values on the same line. I'm going to use the comma separator on the same line. On line 34, I'm actually going to force a new line after these first 4 numbers. There you go. I just wanted to separate the 4 numbers. All right, so I have them all on the same line. But it seems to me that we could be a little bit more friendly because these are just some numbers slammed onto the screen. So on line 38, a more friendly display might be saying that I'm going to put some kind of a label on each one of the numbers. So I'm going to say, this is what I want my print statement to look like. I want it to say subtotal, comma, space with a $sign, 2150 or whatever my subtotal is. I'm going to run it. Oh, that looks much, much more user-friendly. So let's see if we can repeat that with the tab. So on line 44, I'm going to try something a little bit different with the tax. So instead of using the comma separator that I did on line 41 here, I'm going to use the plus separator because I don't like the fact that that $sign is 1 space away from the 200. That $sign should be right up next to the number. And I know that concatenation doesn't add spaces between them. But in order for me to concatenate a string with another variable, that variable has to be a string. So I'm going to typecast it to text, to a string, and then I'm going to run it and see, well, this is much better because now I see the $sign is right up next to text. So I liked that well enough that we're going to try it with tip on line 47. I'm going to cast tip to be a string, and then I'm going to use the plus sign to concatenate them together, and then we'll finish off with the bill total. See if we can use the same trick with the bill total. So it's going to say bill total concatenated with string total. I'm going to use a comma separator between the next string that follows so that there is a space after the $300. I like the fact that there is a space there. And then I'm going to say, wow, you're a big spender. Now, if I look at the output on this program, while I do appreciate that my $sign is snug right up next to my number instead of the comma separated space that is generated, I'm pretty sure that they should be more than 1 decimal place on money values. So in the next program, we're going to do a temperature conversion.